Hey there, this is Ill Factor from beatacademy.com. Thanks for watching the video. I want to share some music production tips and techniques while recreating Metro Booming's Creepin. So let's go ahead and dive right in. So here is the finished product. Now, I know I'm just focusing on one particular section of this song, but and the song is pretty straightforward. You have the beat and stuff like that, but there's something I actually want to focus in on music production wise that I think could be really helpful that you can implement in your workflow. So although I'm not going to be breaking down the whole song in its entirety, I want to point out a couple things that are really helpful that you can use in your workflow. Really quickly, let me just dive right into the drums. Pretty straightforward. It's all really just about sound selection, finding the right sounds to begin with that match the vibe generally that I'm going for. So we have a couple, just a kick, snare, and hi-hat. And here is the pattern. Pretty straightforward, but I'm doing a couple things here just to kind of accentuate. Now, really not a lot of stuff is happening to the actual samples themselves. I'm not compressing them, not distorting them. They sounded great, and I just dragged them into my Ableton Live drum rack. So I really had the drum bus plugin set to about 20%, just giving a little bit of drive and crunch. And then I have this plugin here by Oak Sound Spiff. Now, this is a transient designer, meaning that it's going to allow you to accentuate the transients of a frequency or cut them so that you could do both with this plugin. And I really like the way this works because unlike the transient designer here on the drum bus, which will just treat the audio running through it as a whole, this I can dial in specific frequency bands that I want the transient designer to focus in on. So how much do I want the initial transient of that sound to be accented? That's what I'm doing here. So I'll bypass this. Now, it's not in the sense that the drums are louder, but certain frequencies are being more accented. So you get the sense of that it's more punchier. And that's what this is doing here. So I'm just accenting a little bit more of that kick range here. And a little bit of the snap from the hats and this snare. What's really cool is this feature here in Spiff that you can go into cut mode and it works in the opposite direction. Now, how would this be useful? Well, this will eliminate all the transients of the drums, and I would then treat this as a loop or a layer that I can then layer a kick and snare with. So, light bulbs should be turning on in the sense that you can take a drum groove or a drum loop, implement the cut mode on Spiff, take away any of the big punchy transients, and then replace it with your own kick and snare so that it actually fits as a layered element into your drum programming much better. I'm gonna go back to boost and I'm gonna dial it back. And then just a saturator here, really not much saturating, just using the soft clip on the saturator and the dry and wet about halfway. And that's for the drums. Now for the section where the drums kind of cut out, we're gonna go into our auto filter here, the EQ and filters, place a filter directly onto the drums here, and then just cut it out so that we're losing all the high-end energy. Now, this is just a great way to add contrast to your arrangement. This is how you build and create dynamics in your arrangement. So that if we have, let's say, this section here with the filter drums, and then this section here without it, it just creates a little bit of contrast from one section to the next. So opening that up is a great way to actually add a little bit more excitement and lift to your arrangement. I'm going to focus my attention on the Enya sample and just kind of recreate that in a sense, because what I'm trying to get at here and the principle I want to convey here in this lesson is how you can then actually treat your works as a way to resample yourself and generate new inspiration and new ideas for your current projects. Now, if we listen to the Enya sample, I'm going to play that without the drums. we have the elements here that are in place that are recreating that vibe. And now for the bass, I have Ableton Live's wavetable. We have oscillator 1 and 2 set to a sawtooth. And I'm going to take oscillator 2 and shift that over a whole octave lower and slightly detune that. Now with the filter cutoff open, this is what we have. So to create the tone, we definitely want to remove that harshness of the high end and use the cutoff frequency to cut those off and focus on more of the lows. You can see there's some filter movement, meaning that the filter is going to slightly open on the attack. And I'm achieving that by going into my envelope 2, clicking on the cutoff frequency, entering in the matrix, and just giving a little bit of value here in the envelope to the cutoff frequency. That way I can map out the envelope for envelope 2 and determine how that cutoff is going to open up. Now in the amp envelope, I want a nice long release so that the notes linger after they're being played. And I'm using the unison mode here in classic to really create the depth and the width that I want from the sound. And that's pretty straightforward. That's a really nice place to go with the bass. Now I'm going to layer this, meaning that I'm going to literally drag and drop the same take here. And I've gone an octave higher. And I'm layering this to just, and the purpose behind layering it is because I want to create a little bit more texture to the bass, although by itself is fine. But I decided, let's see what it feels like layering it. And so I'm using Orbit, which is a plugin that I've created. It's a virtual instrument that I've been having a lot of fun using in my projects lately. So if you'd like to download this plugin, it's absolutely yours free. Just click the link below in the description box or visit beatacademy.com/Orbit. So with Orbit, I'm using the contact patch. And just mixing a little bit of Planet A, and the emphasis is really on Planet B. And it's just straightforward, nothing else to add on there. Because the texture it's gonna give layered with this. It's as if I was running the bass through a reverb, but yet without all the messiness of having that low end stuff go through the reverb. I'm having this synth just create a layer on top of that to add the texture, the depth, and a little bit of the dimension that we get from this sound. And then on top of that, I'm also going to be using another instance of Orbit. In this case, I'm using the patch here, Solaris, so that I can go ahead and play the chords. And it gives really a nice atmospheric touch with these three together. Now, the real characteristic of this in the original, it's Enya. It's her doing her thing. It's her layering and the amazing performance that of what makes Enya Enya. And so it's far stretched from what I'm capable of doing, but we're going to be layering a lot of vocals to really create that nice, lush vocal vibe. So here what I decided to do was just do multiple takes of my vocal. And so I'm going to walk you through this process here, but I'm going to start with doing at least 4 takes of one line, which will be this line here. So I'm going to re-record that on another track here. And same thing for the next 2 tracks. Now, what would be helpful once you start getting into stacking or layering or tracking multiple vocals in Ableton Live is to have all the tracks that you are grouping together linked. So I'm going to right click, make sure I link these tracks. That way, when I go to edit and maybe take out unwanted parts like this breath here, it'll do it to all the tracks. And if I wanted to go ahead and fade, it'll do it to all the tracks as well. So I just want to make sure that I have them linked, so it makes it a lot easier for editing and nudging and moving things around. Really helpful tool here. So now that the tracks are linked, we've got our bass note there. I'm going to move on to adding the other note, which is the octave higher. Now, I'm only doing 2 takes of the higher octave because it's such a higher pitch, it's going to stick out easier. And then I move towards just a harmony line for the last 2. Now, what's really going on in each take, in each track, I'm using EQ3 to just cut out some low end. Anything from 144 hertz and below, it's going to cut off. And I have some tuning going on. Set to C sharp minor, just some soft tuning on each individual track. I'm not going to put the tuning on the overall group track because it's going to cause the tuning to go haywire because it's trying to tune stacked group vocals. So you want to have them individually tuned like this. Now that I have all the tracks stacked and layered, the processing. So I've got a gate to eliminate any unwanted noise, but since I already did the edit here, I don't really have to do that, but I'll leave the gate where it's at. And then an EQ just to now bring some air, remove some low end from all the vocals, and just some compression here that I'm using for the purpose of just controlling any of the dynamics that happen when I switch from one note to the other. Now, chorus on this is going to give it the texture that I'm looking for. So it's kind of thin, it's kind of smearing the vocals wider. I've set this to the ensemble mode. And really the dimension and the ambience comes from the reverb. So I'm using a hybrid reverb here in Ableton Live. And I'm actually putting more wet than dry because I want it to be farther back and more ethereal sounding. Now I was messing around with this cassette plugin, but I'm gonna go ahead, delete that. I'm gonna use that later. So now we've got all the vocals, we've got the pads, the bass. Let's just solo that. So basically just muting the drums. And I have the string section here, which I'll mute for right now, but let's just play all this back. Now what I wanna do is take the time to actually resample this. I'm gonna resample this and treat it as if I was sampling it from the original Enya or some other source. So what I'm gonna do is create an audio track, Command T, and on this audio track, we're gonna set the input to resampling. And essentially what that means is within Ableton Live, anything that's being currently played or listening that you can hear or listen to within the Ableton Live DAW can be recorded. You're basically internally resampling. So once the record enable is set there, I'm gonna go ahead and just hit the record button. Now, why do this? Well, for a couple of reasons. A, it could be very inspiring to take a resampled section of your song and tweak and manipulate and use that for either inspiration for another track or to actually bring more dynamics to your arrangement. Here I have now this whole thing sampled. And what I can do now is actually route this or place an effect directly on that and do some cool stuff. So like for instance, I might want to pitch this a whole octave higher and set this to Complex Pro so it doesn't sound all gargly. And I'll remove some of that low end from here. And let's put just a reverb directly onto this. And And now let's layer the whole octave version with ours and see what we get. It does a really nice job of adding that cool thick layer of texture to it that otherwise I wouldn't be able to get if I, wasn't sampling. And so you could do this, pitch it up a whole octave higher, or try a whole octave lower, experiment with it, and just see what it adds to the overall mix. So I actually liked it at a whole octave higher. That's where I'll keep it there. But then I can go ahead and implement where I would say, okay, what if I took this and I wanted to come up with a really cool section for a bridge? I'll take this, hit the R button, reverse it. And there I have a really cool vibe just off of that. Well, I hope this video was helpful and you picked up a couple of tips or two that would help you in your projects. Well, I hope the video was helpful and there was a tip or two that you could use in your projects. And as my gift to you for watching this video, I'd love to send you Orbit, the VST instrument that I created with amazing sounding pads that I showcased in this video. If you'd like to download that, absolutely yours free, then visit beatacademy.com/Orbit. It's VST3 compatible and audio unit compatible and works both on Mac and PC. Go ahead, download, have fun using it, and I'll see you next time.